My name is Alara, and I'm 23 years old. On the day I was set to graduate from university, my parents sat in the third row and loudly mocked the degree I had spent 4 years earning. They called it a worthless piece of paper. Seconds later, the dean of the university stepped up to the microphone and announced an award that would not only change my life, but also expose a secret my family never knew I had. They thought they were witnessing my failure. They were actually front-row spectators to their own downfall. If you've ever felt like your dreams were dismissed by the very people who should have supported them, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. And before I tell you how this one announcement shattered a lifetime of lies, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to hear more true stories about family, betrayal, and the sweet taste of vindication. Before that sun-drenched Saturday in May, my life had been a quiet, relentless campaign to earn an approval that was never on offer. I was the family's resident dreamer, a title that sounded whimsical but was, in reality, a synonym for disappointment. My parents, Mark and Susan, were relentlessly practical people. My father was an accountant who viewed the world through the lens of a balance sheet, measuring everything, including his children, by its potential return on investment. My mother was a real estate agent whose primary concern was curb appeal, not just for houses, but for our family's reputation among her social circle. In their perfectly calculated world, I was a rounding error. The golden child, the prized asset, was my younger brother, Liam. He was a business major, a carbon copy of my father in ambition, and a reflection of my mother's desire for a child with a marketable future. He was confident, pragmatic, and had a knack for saying exactly what our parents wanted to hear. Family dinners were less about connection and more like quarterly board meetings where Liam would present his achievements, a high-profile internship, a networking success, a stellar grade in macroeconomics, and my parents would nod with the satisfied air of shareholders watching their stock rise. My passion, my entire world, was the stars. Since I was a little girl, I had been captivated by the cosmos. While other kids were playing with dolls, I was building model rockets. While Liam was at soccer practice, I was saving my allowance for a better telescope. The universe, with its silent, sprawling grandeur, felt more like home to me than my own house. When I announced I was going to major in astrophysics, the reaction was predictably cold. I remember the evening vividly. We were sitting around the polished mahogany dining table. The one my mother insisted was an investment piece. I had rehearsed my speech, armed with facts about the growing private space industry and the demand for researchers. My father put down his fork and looked at me over the rim of his glasses, his expression identical to the one he wore when reviewing a flawed expense report. "Ilara," he began, his voice devoid of warmth, "let's talk about ROI. What is the return on investment for a degree in stargazing? Who is going to pay you to look at the sky?" "It's more than just looking, Dad," I tried to explain. "It's about understanding the fundamental laws of the universe. It's physics, mathematics, computer modeling." My mother sighed dramatically, a sound she had perfected over years of dealing with life's minor inconveniences, like a closing that fell through, or a daughter who refused to be practical. "How am I supposed to explain this to the Hendersons?" she lamented, referring to her friends whose son was pre-law at an Ivy League school. "Their son is going to be a lawyer, and my daughter, she wants to find aliens?" Liam just smirked, that infuriatingly smug look that said, "See? This is why I'm the favorite." That night set the tone for the next 4 years. My academic achievements were met with polite but vacant interest. When I made the dean's list my freshman year, my father's only comment was, "Well, that's good. At least you're not failing. Make sure you keep that GPA up for the student loans we co-signed for." The financial tether was always there, a reminder that their support was not a gift, but a loan I was expected to repay with a career they could brag about. The pattern of disregard had been etched into our family dynamic long before college. I remember my sophomore year of high school. I spent 6 months building a powerful Dobsonian telescope from scratch for the state science fair. I ground the mirror myself, a painstaking process that left my hands calloused and raw. I designed and built the mounting, learning basic carpentry from online tutorials. The project was my baby. I won first place. I was ecstatic, clutching a large blue ribbon and a check for $500. I called my parents, my voice trembling with excitement. "That's nice, dear," my mother said, her voice distracted. "Listen, we're on our way to Liam's playoff game. He scored the winning goal last week, you know. We'll have to celebrate your science thing later." They never came to the awards ceremony. They left before my name was even called to make it to his soccer game on time. I stood on that stage, alone, watching other parents hug their children. Later that night, Liam's plastic trophy was placed in the center of the mantelpiece. My blue ribbon was eventually tucked into a drawer in my desk. The only person who truly saw me, who nurtured my passion, was my grandfather, my mother's father, Alistair. He was a retired aeronautical engineer who had worked on the Apollo missions. He saw the same fire in my eyes that had once burned in his. He was the one who bought me my first proper telescope, who spent hours with me in his backyard, pointing out constellations and explaining the physics of orbital mechanics. He never once called my dream silly or impractical. He called it important. "Don't you ever let them dim your light, Ilara," he told me once, his voice a low, comforting rumble. "Small minds can't comprehend a big universe. It frightens them." He passed away from a heart attack during my sophomore year of college. His loss left a crater in my life that I didn't think would ever be filled. At his funeral, my parents' grief seemed performative, overshadowed by their concerns about the logistics of the will. I just felt numb. The one person who understood my language was gone. With him went my only shield against my family's constant, quiet disapproval. Without his presence, their dismissiveness became more pronounced. I was no longer just the dreamer. I was the foolish dreamer who had lost her only ally. I poured my grief into my studies, working with a relentless focus that worried my professors. I spent my nights in the university observatory, finding solace in the cold, clear light of distant stars. My senior thesis, a complex analysis of exoplanetary atmospheres, earned me a commendation from the physics department and the attention of my advisor, Dr. Albright. She was a brilliant, no-nonsense woman who saw the potential in me that my family refused to acknowledge. As graduation approached, the family pressure mounted. "Have you started applying for real jobs yet?" my father would ask during our stilted weekly phone calls. "I have a friend at Deloitte who might be able to get you an entry-level data analysis position. It's not glorious, but it pays the bills." The implication was clear. My 4 years of hard work were nothing more than a hobby that now needed to be packed away in favor of a sensible career. They thought this graduation was their final victory lap of disappointment, a public "I told you so." They had no idea it was about to become their stage of public humiliation. They saw the cap and gown as the uniform of a future barista. They couldn't have been more wrong. It was the armor of a warrior they never knew they had created. The catalyst wasn't a single, explosive event like a lottery win or a sudden inheritance. It was something I had been working towards for 4 years, the graduation ceremony itself. This day was meant to be the culmination of my hard work, a celebration of a dream I had pursued against a constant headwind of familial disapproval. For my parents, however, it was simply an obligation to be endured, the final, tedious chapter in the story of my impractical education. The air in the university arena was thick with anticipation and the scent of thousands of floral bouquets. It was a sea of black gowns and beaming faces. I found my seat among the other graduates of the College of Arts and Sciences, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I scanned the crowd and found them easily. My father, looking at his watch as if timing a business meeting. My mother, fanning herself with a program, her lips pursed in a look of polite boredom. And Liam, already engrossed in his phone, probably checking stock prices. Their very presence felt like a performance. They were there because not showing up would have looked bad to their friends. Their support was an accessory, like my mother's expensive handbag, chosen for its appearance, not its substance. A few rows behind them, I spotted my best friend, Chloe, who gave me an enthusiastic two-thumbs-up salute. She was my chosen family, the one who had spent countless nights proofreading my papers and bringing me coffee at the library. Her genuine pride was a stark contrast to my family's barely concealed impatience. As the procession of robed faculty members filed onto the stage, my parents' performance began. I couldn't hear their exact words from my seat on the floor, but I could see the pantomime of their disdain. My mother would lean over and whisper something to my father. He would shake his head with a long-suffering sigh. Liam would look up from his phone, roll his eyes, and say something that made them both chuckle. They were a small island of cynicism in an ocean of celebration. The initial speeches began, a drone of platitudes from university dignitaries. For me, every word was a milestone. For them, it was background noise. I watched as the dean of the university, Dr. Albright, took the podium. She was also my thesis advisor, the woman who had pushed me harder than anyone and had become a fierce mentor. As her eyes scanned the crowd of graduates, they met mine for a fleeting moment. She gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture of shared knowledge and encouragement. It was a silent promise that something special was coming. My parents, of course, were busy whispering to each other and missed it completely. Their attitude wasn't just passive boredom. It was an active, radiating dismissiveness. It was in the way my father audibly sighed every time a speaker mentioned following your passion. It was in the way my mother checked her makeup in a compact mirror during the student body president's speech. They weren't just tolerating the ceremony, they were openly disrespecting it, and by extension, me and every other student there. I tried to focus on the moment, to soak in the feeling of accomplishment. I had done it. I had survived the grueling coursework, the lonely nights in the lab, the constant self-doubt amplified by my family's lack of faith. I had earned this piece of paper, this moment of recognition. But their negativity was like a magnetic field, pulling at my joy, threatening to drag it down into their orbit of practicality and disapproval. I sent a quick text to Chloe. "They're being awful." Her reply was instantaneous. "Who cares? This is your day. You're a literal genius. They're just background characters." Her words were a life raft. She was right. I took a deep breath and resolved to ignore them, to be present in my own celebration. But it was hard. Every time I glanced their way, I saw a fresh performance of their disappointment. It was a slow, corrosive drip of poison on what should have been one of the happiest days of my life. The speeches droned on, and with every passing minute, their mockery seemed to grow more blatant. They believed this was the end of the story, the final bill for a bad investment. In reality, the fuse had just been lit, and the spark was about to fall. The true nature of their contempt didn't reveal itself in one single outburst, but in a series of calculated, cutting actions that unfolded throughout the ceremony. Each one was a small paper cut, insignificant on its own, but together they began to bleed my spirit dry. As the ceremony progressed from the opening remarks to the departmental recognitions, their behavior escalated from passive boredom to active sabotage of my joy. The first incident occurred when they began speaking to the couple seated next to them. I could just barely make out the conversation over the speaker system. The woman had asked my mother what I had studied. I watched my mother's face arrange itself into a mask of strained politeness. "Oh, Alara?" "She studied astrophysics," she said, her tone a masterclass in feigned enthusiasm. She then immediately pivoted. "Our son, Liam, he graduated from the business school last year. He's already an analyst at a top investment firm. We're so proud." She didn't just downplay my achievement, she used it as a conversational stepping stone to brag about my brother. I was a footnote in my own story. The second cut came from Liam. While the valedictorian was giving an impassioned speech about changing the world, my phone buzzed in my lap. It was a text from him, sent from just a few rows behind me. The message read, "Is this almost over? I'm starving. Dad promised us that steakhouse if we survived this. Survived this. As if my graduation was an ordeal, a natural disaster they had to endure before getting to their reward. I glanced back and saw him slumped in his chair, the picture of adolescent boredom, even though he was a 21-year-old man. There was no pride, no brotherly support, just impatience. The third and most blatant act of disrespect came halfway through the ceremony. My mother had, for some reason, brought the program from Liam's graduation the previous year. As the announcer began reading the names of the students graduating with honors, I watched her pull out that old, creased program. She opened it, pointed to Liam's name, printed with the cum laude distinction, and showed it proudly to my aunt, who was sitting beside her. She completely ignored the new, pristine program in her lap, where my own name was listed, also with honors. It was a deliberate, public erasure, a declaration that even on my day, my brother's past achievements were more worthy of attention than my present ones. I tried to rise above it. During a brief lull as they changed speakers, I turned in my seat and offered them a hopeful smile. "It's a beautiful ceremony, isn't it?" I asked, a desperate plea for a crumb of shared happiness. My father looked at me, his expression flat. "It's certainly thorough," he said. "Are you sure you don't want me to call my friend at Deloitte?" It's never too late to pivot to a viable career path. It wasn't advice. It was a verdict. In his eyes, I had already failed, and this whole expensive charade was just delaying the inevitable. My mother chimed in. "Let's just hope you can find a job that pays for the student loans we co-signed for." There it was again. The financial guillotine, held over my head, a constant reminder of my supposed debt to them, not just for the money, but for their tolerance of my foolish dreams. It was in that moment that my phone buzzed again. It was Chloe. Her text read, "Okay, I'm officially furious. I can literally hear your dad from here. Do not let them ruin this. Remember what your grandpa always said about small minds. You are a giant. They are ants. Please, please don't let the ants win." Chloe's message was the external validation I desperately needed. It was a voice from the outside, confirming that I wasn't being overly sensitive, that their behavior was as toxic as it felt. Her words were a lifeline, pulling me back from the brink of tears. She was right. My grandfather would have been furious. He would have told me to hold my head high and let their petty words bounce off the force field of my own self-worth. I took a shaky breath and turned back towards the stage, my spine a little straighter. The final phase of the ceremony began. The presentation of departmental awards. This was the part I was both anticipating and dreading. Dr. Albright had hinted that my thesis was being considered for a special distinction. When the announcer called my name for the Departmental Award for Excellence in Astrophysical Research, a wave of genuine pride washed over me. I stood up, my knees trembling slightly, and walked towards the stage. I could hear Chloe's whooping cheers piercing through the polite applause. As I walked, I risked a glance at my family. They were not clapping. My father was leaning towards my mother, whispering something behind his hand. Liam was, predictably, looking at his phone. The lack of even feigned support was a physical blow. This wasn't just indifference. It was a conscious withdrawal of affection at a moment of public recognition. As I accepted the small, handsome plaque from the department head and shook his hand, I knew they were already dissecting this moment, framing it as another one of my quaint, unprofitable hobbies. I had hoped for a peaceful day, a simple celebration of a milestone achieved, but it was clear they were determined to turn it into a final, definitive judgment on my life choices. They had no idea I wasn't the only one with a plan for this day, and that the real judgment was yet to come. The departmental award was a small victory, but in my family's court of opinion, it was inadmissible evidence. As I walked back to my seat, clutching the cool, heavy plaque in my hands, their judgment was delivered. Not in a whisper, but in a stage whisper, intentionally loud enough for me and everyone in the immediate vicinity to hear. It was my father's voice. dripping with the unique brand of condescending humor he reserved for things he didn't understand. "Excellence in wasting money, more like it," he said to my mother, followed by a dry chuckle. "I wonder what that award is worth. A gold-plated star sticker?" My mother tittered in response. "Oh, Mark, be nice," she said, with no actual intention of him being nice. "Maybe she can hang it in the coffee shop she'll end up working at." The words hit me with the force of a physical slap. It wasn't just the content of the insult, I had heard variations of it for years. It was the context. The sheer, unmitigated gall of saying it here. Now, in public. In front of my peers, my professors, and other families who were beaming with pride. They weren't just insulting me. They were performing their disapproval, making a public spectacle of their disappointment. The students sitting in the row in front of me turned to look, their faces a mixture of shock and pity. An older woman, 2 seats down from my parents, shot them a look of pure disgust. Their bubble of self-importance was so thick that they didn't even notice. Or perhaps they did, and they simply didn't care. Humiliating me was more important than maintaining social decorum. That was the moment everything shifted. A profound, crystalline clarity washed over me. For my entire life, I had been operating under the delusion that if I just worked hard enough, achieved enough, proved myself enough, their approval would finally materialize. I had been playing a game that was rigged from the start, a game where the goalposts were always moving, and the fundamental rules were designed to ensure I could never win. My grandfather's words echoed in my mind. "Don't you ever let them dim your light." For years, I had allowed them to hang a dimmer switch on my soul, and they had kept it turned down low. In that moment of public humiliation, my hand finally reached for the switch and broke it off. The light flooded back in, white hot and furious. The guilt that had been gnawing at me for weeks, guilt about the secret I was keeping, about the events that were about to unfold, evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, hard certainty. They deserved what was coming. They had earned it. This wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of survival. It was the universe rebalancing the scales that had been tipped against me for 23 years. I sat down, placing the plaque gently on my lap. I didn't look at them. I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing my tears or my anger. I simply faced forward, my posture regal, and focused on the stage. My heart was no longer pounding with anxiety, but with a steady, powerful rhythm, the rhythm of a countdown. Dr. Albright returned to the podium. The gentle murmur of the arena quieted. "And now," she began, her voice resonating with a significance that only I could fully understand. "It is my distinct honor to present the university's highest and most prestigious award, an award created to honor a legacy of innovation and to invest in a future of discovery." My parents shifted in their seats, their boredom returning now that my minor moment was over. My father probably assumed it was for some business school prodigy or a future medical marvel. He leaned back, ready to be impressed by someone else's child, someone who was a sound investment. He had no idea that the legacy being honored was intertwined with our own family, and that the future being invested in was the very one he had spent years trying to bankrupt. As I walked back to my seat, clutching my small departmental plaque, their laughter echoed in my ears. They thought that was the end of it. They couldn't have been more wrong. The dean cleared her throat again. And now, for the university's highest honor, the real show was about to begin. My family believed my only assets were a useless degree and a mountain of co-signed debt. They saw me as weak, dependent, and utterly at their mercy. What they didn't know was that my greatest champion, my grandfather, had armed me for this very battle from beyond the grave. My secret weapon wasn't just one thing. It was a brilliantly orchestrated, multi-layered plan of liberation he had set in motion years ago. Dr. Albright continued from the podium. "This year, we are honored to present the inaugural Dr. Alistair Vance Legacy Fellowship for Pioneering Research." A gasp escaped my mother's lips. Vance, her own father's name. I saw her turn to my father, her brow furrowed in confusion. They knew my grandfather had been an engineer. but they had always treated his career as a historical footnote, a relic from a bygone era. They had no idea he had maintained close ties with the university, his alma mater, or that he had been a significant, albeit anonymous, benefactor for decades. This fellowship, Dr. Albright explained, her voice filled with reverence, was established through a generous endowment from Dr. Vance's estate. It is designed to support a graduating senior of extraordinary promise in the physical sciences, providing them with the resources to pursue ambitious, postgraduate research without constraint. My parents were now sitting bolt upright, their boredom replaced by a greedy, intense focus. An endowment. Estate. These were words they understood. This was ROI. I could almost see the gears turning in my father's head. How much? Who gets it? Is there a piece of this for us? The plan had been revealed to me a month before graduation. I received a formal letter from a man named Mr. Davison, my grandfather's estate lawyer. He requested a meeting. I went to his quiet, book-lined office downtown, expecting to discuss some small token my grandfather might have left me. What he laid out was a strategy so comprehensive, so thoughtful, it felt like my grandfather was in the room with us. Mr. Davison explained that my grandfather, knowing my parents' disposition, had structured his estate with surgical precision. He had created two separate financial instruments. The first was the public fellowship, a massive, headline-grabbing grant tied directly to the university and my field of study. The second was a private, personal trust fund, just for me, with a different set of stipulations. Your grandfather was a very wise man, Alara, Mr. Davison had said, his eyes kind. He knew your parents would never financially support your academic pursuits. He also suspected they might try to lay claim to any success you achieved on your own. He then handed me a thick, sealed envelope. Inside was a letter, written in my grandfather's familiar, elegant script. I read it right there in the lawyer's office, tears blurring the words. My dearest stargazer, it began. If you are reading this, then I am gone. But I hope my love and my faith in you remain. I have watched your parents try to clip your wings since the day you were born. They are good people in their own way, I suppose, but they are blinded by a fear of the unconventional. They see your passion not as a gift, but as a liability. I will not allow their fear to become your cage. The fellowship is for your work. It is public, it is prestigious, and its terms are ironclad. They cannot touch it. It is designed to give you a platform they cannot ignore and a career they cannot belittle. The separate trust is for your life. It is for a down payment on a house, a reliable car, the freedom to travel, the security to live without looking over your shoulder. Use it to build a life of your own design, beholden to no one. I have one piece of advice, my dear. Let them show their true colors. Do not warn them. Do not give them a chance to feign support when they smell money. Let them be who they are, and then you be who you are. A brilliant, capable woman who is finally free. Oh, that letter became my shield. Mr. Davison and I had gone over the plan. I was to say nothing. I was to endure the graduation ceremony and allow events to unfold naturally. The public announcement would be the first move. The legal documents, held securely by his firm, would be the checkmate. The fellowship funds were structured to be paid directly to the university and the partner research institution, designated for lab fees, equipment, travel, and a living stipend. It was untouchable. The personal trust had only one primary trustee, me. As I sat there in the auditorium, watching my parents lean forward with undisguised avarice, I felt a profound sense of calm. This wasn't my fight alone. It was a final, brilliant move in a chess game my grandfather had been playing on my behalf all along. He had anticipated their greed, their dismissiveness, their inevitable attempt to co-opt my success. And he had built an unbreachable fortress around my future. As the dean started reading the description of the fellowship and the groundbreaking research it was intended to fund, I could feel my grandfather's presence, a comforting weight on my shoulder. This wasn't just an award. It was his final message to my family. a testament to a different kind of legacy, not one of balance sheets and social climbing, but one of curiosity, courage, and unconditional love. And it was about to be delivered on a silver platter, right in front of an audience of thousands. The air in the arena grew still as Dr. Albright reached the crescendo of her announcement. The stage was set, the audience was captive, and my family was leaning forward, their faces a mixture of confusion and rapacious hope. They thought they were about to witness a stranger's good fortune. They had no idea they were about to be implicated in a family drama broadcast on the arena's jumbotrons. The inaugural Dr. Alistair Vance Legacy Fellowship is awarded to a student whose senior thesis was described by the review committee as a work of staggering originality and analytical rigor, a student who embodies the spirit of discovery that Dr. Vance himself championed, Dr. Albright declared, her voice ringing with genuine pride. It is my immense pleasure to award this fellowship to Miss Alara Vance Covington. My name echoed through the massive space. For a moment, there was a stunned silence, followed by an eruption of applause that was thunderous, far louder than for any previous award. My fellow graduates turned to me, their faces breaking into wide smiles. Chloe was on her feet, screaming with joy. The giant screens on either side of the stage, which had been showing a generic university logo, now flashed to a live feed of my face. I had practiced a look of humble surprise, but the emotion that washed over me was real. It was a tidal wave of vindication, grief, and overwhelming gratitude for my grandfather. Then, Dr. Albright delivered the final, devastating blow. As part of this fellowship, Miss Covington will receive a starting research position at the prestigious Lowell Observatory and a personal research grant to fund her work for the next 5 years, a grant totaling $250,000. A collective gasp swept through the arena. The applause faltered for a second, replaced by a murmur of disbelief, before swelling again even louder. $250,000. The number hung in the air, electric and undeniable. The camera feed on the jumbotron, as if directed by a deity of dramatic irony, cut from my face to the audience, and for a glorious, excruciating 5 seconds, it landed squarely on my family. Their faces were a portrait of utter, undisguised shock. The masks of polite boredom had shattered, revealing the raw, ugly greed beneath. My father's jaw was literally hanging open. His accountant's brain was visibly short-circuiting, trying to process a number that simply did not compute with his assessment of my life's value. My mother's face was pale, her perfectly applied lipstick suddenly looking garish against her bloodless skin. Her eyes were wide, darting back and forth between the stage and the screen, as if she couldn't believe the evidence of her own senses. And Liam. Oh, Liam. His smug smirk had been wiped clean from his face, replaced by a look of slack-jawed envy so potent it was almost comical. The entire arena witnessed their reaction. They had made a spectacle of their disapproval, and now the universe, with a wicked sense of humor, was making a spectacle of their greed. My legs felt unsteady as I stood and made my way to the stage for the second time. The applause was a physical force, buffering me, holding me up. Dr. Albright enveloped me in a warm hug, whispering, "He would be so, so proud of you." She handed me the large, elegant award and then gestured to the microphone. Miss Covington would like to say a few words. I hadn't planned to speak, but in that moment, I knew I had to. I stepped up to the microphone, my hands shaking slightly as I adjusted it. I looked out at the sea of faces, and then my eyes found them. The 3 people who had spent my entire life telling me I wasn't enough. They were watching me now, their expressions frozen in a grotesque tableau of shock and frantic recalculation. "Thank you," I began, my voice clear and steady, amplified throughout the hall. "Thank you to the selection committee and to the faculty of the physics department, especially Dr. Albright, for your guidance and belief in me." I paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. "But most of all," I continued, turning my gaze directly to my family, ensuring they knew these next words were for them. I want to thank my grandfather, Dr. Alistair Vance. He was a man who believed that the greatest return on investment was not in dollars, but in dreams. He taught me to look up at the sky and see not emptiness, but infinite possibility. This award is his legacy, and it is the honor of my life to carry it forward. I deliberately, pointedly did not thank my parents. The silence that followed my words was more profound than the applause. In that public omission, I had said everything. I had drawn a line in the sand, separating the one person who had truly supported me from those who had only ever tried to tear me down. As I walked off the stage, the ceremony announcer declared the proceedings officially over. Caps flew into the air, and chaos erupted as graduates began to search for their families. As I was immediately swarmed by professors and classmates offering congratulations, I saw them, my family. They were pushing their way through the throng of people, their faces now contorted into masks of fake, manic pride. The real confrontation, the one without an audience, was just beginning. But I was no longer afraid. For the first time in my life, I held all the power. The celebratory chaos of the post-ceremony crowd provided a temporary buffer, but it couldn't last. My family, now a united front of opportunistic affection, finally broke through the wall of my well-wishers. My mother reached me first, her arms wrapping around me in a hug that felt both possessive and hollow. "Oh, Alara, honey, we're just so proud," she gushed, her voice an octave higher than usual. $250,000. We never doubted you for a second." The lie was so audacious it was almost breathtaking. My father was right behind her, clapping me on the shoulder with a forced, hearty familiarity. "That's my girl," he boomed, his eyes gleaming with a terrifying intensity. "Astrophysics! Who knew? We need to go out and celebrate. That steakhouse Liam was talking about. And then, tomorrow, we need to sit down and have a serious family meeting about financial planning. This is a lot of money. It needs to be managed properly. Our money." He had already claimed it. In his mind, my success was a corporate asset that had just been transferred to the family's portfolio, and as the self-appointed CEO, he was ready to manage it. "There's nothing to talk about," I said, my voice quiet but firm. I gently extracted myself from my mother's embrace. "The fellowship has very specific terms." "Nonsense," my father scoffed. "There are always ways. Loopholes. We'll have my lawyer look at it." "That won't be necessary," a calm, authoritative voice said from behind me. Mr. Davison, my grandfather's lawyer, had appeared as if on cue, a slim leather briefcase in his hand. He had attended the ceremony at my request. The terms of the Dr. Vance Fellowship are ironclad. The funds are non-transferable and are managed through the university for the explicit purpose of academic research. They cannot be diverted for any other reason. My father's face darkened. "And who are you?" "I am Michael Davison, Dr. Vance's estate attorney," he said, handing my father a business card. "I am also the executor of the private trust he established for Alara." "Private trust?" my mother repeated, her eyes widening. "There's more?" Before Mr. Davison could answer, I cut in. "Chloe is waiting for me," I said, looking past my family as if they were strangers. "I have to go." "You're not going anywhere," Liam interjected, stepping forward with a look of entitled petulance. "This is a family matter. You owe us an explanation." "I don't owe you anything," I said, looking him dead in the eye. The years of quiet resentment boiled down to that one simple sentence. I turned and walked away. Chloe was waiting by the exit, her car keys in her hand. Mr. Davison held my family at bay, calmly explaining legal realities they were not equipped to handle. As Chloe and I pushed through the glass doors and into the bright afternoon sun, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying for 23 years. The initial aftermath was a storm of frantic, abusive communication. My phone blew up with texts and voicemails. My father's messages were laced with legal-sounding threats, promising to contest the will, to claim I had exerted undue influence over my grandfather. My mother's were a masterclass in emotional manipulation, alternating between tearful pleas about tearing the family apart and accusations of my profound selfishness. Liam's were the most honest. "You're really gonna keep all that money for yourself? After everything Dad and Mom did for you? Some daughter you are." I didn't answer a single one. I stayed at Chloe's apartment for the first few days, a sanctuary of sanity. We ordered takeout, watched terrible movies, and I slowly began to process my newfound freedom. For the first time, their anger didn't inspire fear or guilt in me. It was just noise. The pathetic, impotent rage of bullies who had just had their favorite toy taken away. I learned later from my aunt that they had actually tried to follow through on their threats. My father called the university's endowment office, demanding to speak to someone about his daughter's fellowship. He was politely, but firmly, stonewalled and referred to Mr. Davison. My mother called distant relatives, spinning a sob story about her confused, impressionable daughter being manipulated by a greedy university. No one bought it. They had shown their true colors too publicly. The sight of their faces on that jumbotron had become a piece of family lore overnight. Their world, once so ordered and secure, was beginning to crumble without me as the designated failure to prop up their sense of superiority. They had lost their scapegoat. More importantly, they had lost control. I had my future, my grandfather's legacy, and a fortress of legal and financial independence. But I knew they wouldn't give up that easily. Their next move was both predictable and utterly pathetic. A final, desperate gambit to reassert the power they had so spectacularly lost. 1 year can feel like a lifetime. The person I was on that graduation stage felt like a distant ancestor to the woman I had become. I was now living in Flagstaff, Arizona, a city nestled among pine forests under a canopy of the darkest, clearest skies I had ever seen. My apartment had a small balcony that faced the San Francisco peaks, and most nights I would sit out there with a mug of tea, simply looking up. I was working at the Lowell Observatory, the very place where Pluto was discovered, as the inaugural Vance Fellow. My life had found a new rhythm, one dictated not by family obligations, but by the quiet, meticulous work of discovery. My research into the atmospheric composition of TRAPPIST-1e exoplanets was gaining traction in the academic community. I had co-authored my first peer-reviewed paper, and my colleagues weren't just colleagues, they were collaborators, mentors, and friends. They respected me for my mind, for the quality of my work. They didn't care about my family's social standing or my brother's career path. They cared about data, about theories, about the relentless pursuit of knowledge. For the first time, I felt I truly belonged. The personal trust my grandfather left me had been the key to this new life. It wasn't an extravagant sum, but it was enough. I had used it to put a down payment on a modest condo, buy a reliable used car that could handle the mountain roads, and set up a comfortable life without the specter of debt haunting me. It was security. It was independence. It was peace. The news from back home trickled in through occasional calls with my aunt, the only family member who had unequivocally taken my side. The Covington family, without me as their emotional ballast, had drifted into stormy seas. The most significant shipwreck was Liam's. His can't-miss startup, a vaguely defined fintech app that he had persuaded my parents to invest their savings in, had imploded spectacularly. He had burned through over $100,000 of their retirement fund before the venture collapsed under the weight of his own arrogance and incompetence. The financial strain had fractured my parents' carefully constructed facade. My aunt described their house as a place of simmering resentment and constant, bitter arguments. My father blamed my mother for coddling Liam. My mother blamed my father for pushing him into a world he wasn't ready for. In truth, they were both architects of his failure, and without my uselessness to unite them in shared disappointment, they turned on each other. They had tried to re-establish contact with me, of course. The tone of their messages had shifted over the months from rage to a cloying, manipulative sweetness. About 6 months in, my mother called. "Ilara, darling," she began, her voice dripping with fake warmth. "We were just thinking, your father and I, that this distance has gone on long enough. Family is family. We miss you." I waited. I knew what was coming. "And she continued, with Liam's little business setback, things have been a bit tight. We were wondering if you might be able to help out, just a small loan from your trust for your brother." This was the moment I had been preparing for. In the past, a request like that would have filled me with a toxic cocktail of guilt and obligation. Now, I felt nothing but a calm, resolute clarity. "I'm sorry to hear about Liam's business," I said, my voice polite but distant. "But the terms of my trust are very clear. The funds are for my living expenses and to support my career. I can't access them for any other reason. And my fellowship grant is tied to the observatory. I'm afraid I can't help." There was a stunned silence on the other end. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't accused. I had simply stated a fact, using the very language of rules and finance that they respected. I had used their own weapons against them. "Oh," she said, her voice turning cold. "I see. So that's Howard Island." "Yes, Mom," I replied gently. "That's Howard Island." That conversation marked the final shift in our power dynamic. They still call occasionally, on birthdays and holidays. The conversations are brief and superficial. They ask about my work in the same way one might ask about the weather, without any real interest or understanding. They never mention money again. They know that door is closed, bolted, and guarded by a team of lawyers. I had built a new family in Arizona. Chloe had come to visit twice, falling in love with the desert landscape. My colleagues at the observatory had become my community. We had weekly potlucks, went on long hikes, and spent hours debating everything from string theory to the best place to get tacos in town. They still didn't truly understand what had happened on that graduation day. They saw the money, they saw the job, they saw the material success that they had always craved for me, albeit in a form they couldn't comprehend. But they couldn't see the real prize I had won that day, the thing I was celebrating every time I looked up at the pristine, unpolluted night sky. It was something far more valuable than any check, and it was something they could never, ever touch. Sitting on my balcony here in Arizona, with the vast, silent expanse of the desert stretching out into the darkness, I often find my thoughts drifting back to that graduation day. The air here is different. It's thin and clean, and on most nights, the sky is so startlingly clear that it feels less like a ceiling and more like an open door. The Milky Way isn't a faint, hazy suggestion like it was back home. It's a brilliant, textured river of light, a celestial brushstroke painted across the cosmos. It's on these quiet nights, under this cathedral of stars, that I've finally been able to process the true meaning of what happened. The memory no longer carries the sharp sting of anger or the dull ache of pain. Instead, it plays out in my mind like a pivotal scene from a film about a different person, a younger, more fragile version of myself who was about to be irrevocably transformed. The world, and my family, saw the events of that day through a very simple lens. The impractical dreamer, the family disappointment, had stumbled into a fortune. They saw the plaque, they heard the applause, and they fixated on the number. $250,000. They believed the story was about money, but they were wrong. The money was never the prize, it was merely the consequence. The real award I received that day was something far more intangible and infinitely more valuable. It was clarity. It was the moment the fog of a lifetime of manipulation, guilt, and conditional love finally lifted, revealing the stark, unvarnished truth of my reality. For 23 years, I had existed in a state of emotional debt, laboring under the false belief that love and approval were commodities to be earned. My family had been the sole arbiters of my worth, and they had consistently appraised me as a failing asset. My graduation was supposed to be the final, public declaration of my bankruptcy. But when Dr. Albright announced that fellowship, And when the Jumbotron captured their faces, the raw, unfiltered shock and greed, it was as if a spell was broken. I saw them for the first time, not as the all-powerful judges of my life, but as they truly were. Small, frightened people, trapped in a worldview so narrow it couldn't accommodate anything as grand as a star. The real prize was the realization that I didn't need their validation because it had never been worth having in the first place. The true inheritance my grandfather left me wasn't the trust fund or the fellowship. It was the permission slip I didn't know I was so desperately waiting for. It was a posthumous declaration of faith, a final, resounding message that said, "Your dreams are valid. Your path is worthy. You are enough." The money was simply the tool, the key he forged to unlock the cage they had built around me. But opening the door and stepping out into the sunlight? That was a choice I had to make for myself. And in that moment on the stage, when I chose to thank him, and only him, I wasn't just accepting an award. I was claiming my own freedom. There's a profound and painful irony in the fact that my family, in their relentless campaign to make me practical, actually engineered the very circumstances of my liberation. Their constant, corrosive disapproval acted like a whetstone, sharpening my resolve in ways their support never could have. Their endless questioning of my path forced me to know my why with an unshakable, diamond-hard certainty. Their refusal to invest in my dream is the sole reason my grandfather created a financial fortress around it. Their dismissal was the dark, fertile soil from which my independence was forced to grow. A ship isn't built to stay in the harbor, and a seed needs pressure to break through the earth. In their own misguided way, they provided the pressure that ultimately allowed me to break free and set sail. I don't feel gratitude for their behavior, but I do recognize its paradoxical role in my own becoming. I succeeded not just in spite of them, but in some ways, because of them. My relationship with them now is a carefully managed, low-orbit affair. It exists through brief, superficial phone calls on holidays and birthdays. The conversations are a delicate dance around the massive, unspoken truths that lie between us. They ask about my work with a polite but vacant curiosity, the way one might ask about a neighbor's hobby. I tell them about the latest data we've collected, and they'll say, "Oh, that's nice, dear," before changing the subject to the weather or their golf scores. They never mention money. They never ask for help. That one firm boundary I drew after Liam's business failed was the most important structure I ever built. I've learned that setting boundaries isn't an act of cruelty. It's a necessary act of self-preservation. It is a quiet, powerful declaration that you will no longer allow your peace to be someone else's casualty. It's teaching people, through your own actions, how you demand to be treated. And I've learned that sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for a relationship is to put a healthy distance between it and yourself. This distance has allowed me to discover what real family feels like. It's not about blood or obligation. It's about shared wonder. It's my friend Chloe, who still calls me every week and asks, "So, have you discovered any new aliens yet?" with genuine, laughing affection. It's my colleagues at the observatory, who will gather on a Tuesday night with takeout and argue passionately about the possibility of life on Europa. It's the feeling of belonging to a community bound not by a shared surname, but by a shared sense of awe. This is my constellation of support, and their light is steady and true. My grandfather's true legacy, the one I strive to honor every day, was his understanding that practicality and wonder are not opposing forces. They are two sides of the same coin. He was an engineer who built the machines that reached for the stars. He understood that the grandest dreams require the most meticulous foundations. My parents only saw the foundations. They saw the balance sheets, the career paths, the safe, terrestrial world of numbers and property values. They were afraid of looking up. My grandfather taught me that the foundations are only built for one purpose: to give you a stable platform from which to launch. He didn't just leave me a key. He left me a map and a full tank of fuel. When you spend your nights staring into the heart of a nebula that is millions of light years away, It fundamentally changes your perspective. You begin to understand the breathtaking scale of time and space. The dramas of our small human lives, which feel so all-consuming and monumental, are revealed to be what they are: tiny, fleeting sparks in an immense and ancient darkness. The years of feeling small and insignificant under my family's gaze now seem absurd. Their world, which was once the entire boundary of my own, is now just one planet, in one solar system, in one arm of a galaxy among billions. This perspective doesn't diminish the pain I felt, but it puts it in its proper place. It's a part of my history, not the entirety of my universe. The most valuable lesson I have learned is this: you cannot discover new oceans unless you have the courage to lose sight of the shore. For me, my family was that shore. It was familiar, it was known, but it was also the absolute limit of my world. The universe I was desperate to explore required me to build my own ship, learn to navigate by my own stars, and sail directly into the terrifying, beautiful unknown. And out here, in the vast, quiet darkness, surrounded by infinite possibility, I have never felt more grounded, more centered, or more at home. So, now I want to turn it over to you. We all have stars we want to follow, whether they are artistic passions, career ambitions, or a deep-seated desire to live a more authentic life. Tell me, have you ever had to choose between the star you felt compelled to follow and the safe ground of your family's or society's expectations? How did you find the courage to navigate that journey, and what did you discover on the other side? Please, share your stories in the comments below. I promise you, I read every single one, and your stories create a community that helps us all feel a little less alone in our own private universes. If this story resonated with you, if it stirred something in your own heart, please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe for more true stories about charting your own course, and share this with anyone in your life who might need a reminder that their dreams are not foolish, they are gravitational forces, pulling them towards the person they are meant to become. Always remember, the universe is infinitely vast and filled with more wonder than we can possibly imagine. Don't ever let anyone with a small mind or a limited sky convince you that you can't reach for the stars. Thank you for listening.